Hello there, welcome back to The Closet Historian. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about the secret project, Project 83. Yes, I mentioned this very briefly in my fall and winter sewing plans. I said I had a semi-secret project I was going to be calling codename Project 83, which really only happened in that video because I just, it's really easy to have secret projects here on the internet. If you just don't share anything about them, no one knows. But I had been planning on making a Luke Skywalker Return of the Jedi jacket-inspired 50s dress for a long while now, and I finally got around to it here for my Star Wars lookbook. I will put a card up to that video here if you haven't seen it yet, combining two of my favorite things, vintage fashion and Star Wars. So combining those two things together, I wanted to create a series of looks, and I did construct a couple of projects especially for that video, and this Luke Skywalker inspired dress was one of them. Today I'm going to be doing this a little bit different than I normally do here on the channel. Normally for my sewing projects, I just do one long video where I do talk about the concept for the project, do the pattern drafting for it, do the sewing for it, and then wrap everything up all in one video. But today I'm going to be trying something different and breaking it up into 3 videos for you. So today's going to be a general overview of the project in general, kind of my inspirations behind it, showing you how I modified my pattern a little bit of the sewing, and then tomorrow I'll be putting up the long version with all my rambling, detailed pattern drafting and sewing information and stuff like that. So for those of you who do enjoy the long sewing videos I put here on my channel, that'll be coming tomorrow, and then today it's just going to be kind of a general summary version, the Cliff Notes version of those videos for you all. So how this project came about was that I was browsing on Pinterest one random day, who knows when it was, and I saw this image of a 1950s dress with the collar folded, just like the jacket that Luke wears in the Return of the Jedi film from 1983. So I saw this pattern illustration from the 1950s and immediately thought to that costume from the film, and I thought, well gosh, it's just so similar, it would be really easy to make a 1950s dress combining, the 50s elements with that costume from Return of the Jedi. And being a Star Wars fan, I thought that would be a really fun project to work on. So I kind of put it in the back of my mind for the future. Thought it would be a fun project, something a little bit bringing more, not that I do cosplay or costuming anymore in general. It's not really something that I work on just because with limited funds, I don't like to spend them on things that I won't get to wear often, I guess. That's how I kind of plan or budget my sewing. So when it comes to like costuming, I don't really do costuming anymore because it is very expensive sometimes for fabric and materials, and then you only get to wear the thing very few times, or if at all, maybe just for photos even. So I try and, if I'm going to do a more costumey project, make it something that's still very wearable, and I thought that is something I could do with this. So these two different kinds of inspiration were kind of floating around my brain. 1950s dresses that were similar in style in the sense that they had like Mandarin collars, were high-necked, were close and slim-fitting like that jacket was, only with, the rest of it being a 50s dress, and then also the Return of the Jedi jacket, and having those things all swirl in my mind and kind of jam together. I knew I wanted to do a combination of the two. So what I, of course, did was sat down with my basic block pattern that I always use to draft my patterns from. I do draft all my own sewing patterns, and I do it using this, which is called a basic block, sometimes called a sloper or a fitting shell. You can buy patterns for these from major pattern companies, and then edit them to fit you and then use them like I use mine. Mine are drafted from scratch, which is something I will be getting into on the channel here more soon. But using my block, I went ahead and turned that into a princess seam block because basically Luke's jacket does have princess seams. Now, I'm not sure they call them that on menswear. I'm sure it's like princely seams or something like that. But it does have those seams running down the front of on either side of the jacket, and that's exactly how a princess seamed bodice is done. So I first turned my bodice block into a princess seamed bodice front, and then I was able to do some more work up here to turn it into a more of a yoke and collar situation like Luke's jacket was. So the first thing I had to do there was create this like front curved panel on the front. A yoke like on this jacket is easily added to a pattern. So to take this princess seam bodice here, and I drew a line where I wanted that yoke to be, and you just add seam allowance to either side. You can kind of cut in style lines wherever you want on a pattern like this. It's quite simple, actually. So I added the yoke to the front of this, and then I just added a yoke to the back. It was hard to see what was going on with the back of the Return of the Jedi jacket. There aren't good promotional images like there are for the front, unfortunately, at least not any that I've seen. So if you know of any, do link them for me in the comments below, because I haven't seen any. So for the back, I just added a yoke across, and that's all I really did to the back. I kept the dart back there. I didn't bother turning it into a princess seam back there. It was all going to be fine in the end. So for the front, I just added that yoke, and then I drafted the Mandarin Collar, which you can see me doing here. I'm just following the instructions in my favorite pattern drafting book by Helen Joseph Armstrong, which I'm always recommending here on the channel because it is the pattern drafting book that I most like using and have been using for a very long time now. So I just drafted that collar and it ended up working out perfectly, which was awesome. So then once I had my bodice pattern all done, I just used the basic sleeve from my fitting shell, my sloper, my basic most long sleeve with a dart in the elbow for this one. And then I used the basic pencil skirt from the fitting shell sloper basic block pattern as well. So just my basic pencil skirt pattern as well. And so I had everything I needed to have cut everything out. Went ahead and cut everything out, of course, out of some black cotton sateen with a slight stretch from Joann's. I also bought the same fabric in white for facing the underside of the front turn back panel, basically. Next, of course, I had to start sewing everything together, just kind of making my way methodically through each seam and then going ahead and doing a lot of top stitching on this as well, just to hold everything not only down because I wasn't doing a lining for this. I wanted to make sure the insides still looked quite nice, so I did serge all the raw edges of my pieces. First, before I could do the additional panel that I top stitched on with the turn back, I just sewed the dress together as you would normally if you weren't going to do that additional detail. So it just gets sewn along the yoke and along the princess seams. All of that was then top stitched, or most of it was top stitched, you can see here in the video, and then sewing the collar on and all that. And then before I attached the bodice to the skirt, I went ahead and sewed on the front little trapezoidal shaped piece here. You can kind of see that here in this video. When I cut this center front panel piece for my princess seamed bodice, what I did is I cut one to be sewn into the dress like this, and then I cut two extras, one black and one white, so I could create this little, almost like a patch pocket panel sort of thing that gets put on top of the almost finished garment, basically. So the bodice is all sewn together, and then I have this separate white and black double-sided panel here that gets sewn on over the princess seam. So because it's the same, it lines up the same along the princess seams, I just went ahead and pinned that panel on along the princess seams and then sewed it to look like the rest of the top stitching. I just top stitched it down into place on top of the panel underneath, basically. So it just matches perfectly because it's the same pattern piece, of course. And then I just stitched it all the way up on one side and then left the other side open so it would fold down, like the little flap that I needed, the little turn back collar here. I think Luke's probably was held up by some extra stitches or something like they just seam ripped it or something, because it doesn't look like there's a snap or any sort of closure that holds it closed. So I assume it was just like tacked or stitched in place a little bit, and then they just remove those stitches when his jacket falls open at the end of that film. I'm not really sure. I don't seem to see a closure anywhere. I feel like if there was like a snap or something, it'd be quite obvious. So I just made mine so that it would always be flapped down with that little bit of white showing so we could get an idea. Most people, I think, if this was folded up, wouldn't recognize this dress as being inspired by that costume, but with it folded down, I think true fans will be able to recognize this dress as being inspired by the Return of the Jedi jacket. But after I had the bodice all constructed and that extra panel put on, I went ahead and set in the sleeves, hemmed those a little bit, of course, as well. I wish I had made them a tiny bit longer, but what are you gonna do? I was working under a kind of a deadline here. So I attached the sleeves onto the rest of the bodice, sewed the skirt onto the bodice at the waist, of course, and then it was time to put in the zipper. So I just did that the same way I always do. I kind of make my lapped zippers just using a regular presser foot. It's like the Lazy Gal's zipper, but it works for me, and it's one of those things where it's like if you find a zipper technique you like, what are the odds you're gonna change that? Because zippers are kind of a hellish experience, and if you find a way to put them in that works for you, just go with it, you know? But then all that was left was to finish the hem and the little slit in the back of the skirt. So I just went ahead and sewed that down by hand mostly. And then the dress was finished. So I was really happy that I was able to get this one done in time, even though I was filming it, which does slow me down when I'm sewing, of course, to be filming every step and moving the camera around and things like that. But I think it's worth it for those of you who are interested in seeing the behind the scenes of this sort of project. I was really happy with how this dress came out in the end. I really love the fit of it. I love the feel of it. It makes me feel very powerful when I have it on. I feel like a Master Jedi wearing this, like I could Master Jedi my way through a board meeting, maybe. Luckily, I don't have to deal with such things because I'm pretty far from the corporate world down here in this little sewing room. But, you know, you never know when you're going to need a commanding dress. I also feel like it would be a really nice date dress, even though it's super covered up, but I felt very powerful in it. And you want to feel confident in those situations, I assume. I wouldn't really know, but I assume. So hopefully this video gives you a taste of how I put this project together, kind of my ideas behind it, and the patterning and sewing process for it. Of course, again, the long version of my sewing and patterning for this is coming tomorrow. So if you want to see everything from design all the way through the patterning stages, every step of it, you know, showing how I did the princess seam, how I've drafted the color exactly, things like that, that'll be coming tomorrow, and then the sewing video will be coming tomorrow as well. I'm breaking that into 2 parts. Just trying something a little bit different to see if the algorithm likes that any better. You know, just trying to figure out what artificial intelligence likes. Who knows? It's very sci-fi though, so fits the theme. But anyway, thank you for tuning in here to check out the behind the scenes of making this Project 83 Return of the Jedi inspired dress. Again, I hope I will see most of you tomorrow for the long version of this video, and the rest of you I will see next week. Bye.